Welcome to Southwest Florida Frontline, the platform where America's first responders, last responders, and military personnel share their stories. This is your platform to share your story, inspire others, and be heard. The views, experiences, and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and do not represent the official stance of any affiliated organizations or entities. The information is for general informational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. We are committed to maintaining the privacy and confidentiality of all guest speakers and participants and adhere to the highest standards of ethical conduct.
Hello and welcome back to my podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Carola Liebe-Harkort, a very impressive Swedish scientist, researcher, teacher, nurse, archaeologist, osteologist, you name it. So Carola has a very impressive career, and do you mind just introducing yourself a little bit and telling us all those fascinating things that you have been doing throughout your life?
Yes, thank you very much, Catherine. It's very nice to be here with you. I'm sitting in Sweden, in Stockholm, and you in Florida. Mm-hmm. Far away, but although very close. I'm Carola. As you said, I am an archaeologist, osteologist, and I started studying archaeology in 1993, and then after osteology. I worked as an osteologist until 2013, researching, teaching a lot in different universities in Sweden, abroad, became a very national, not famous, but rather famous osteologist in Sweden, I would say. And a little bit famous, even international. But then, 2013, I decided, or let's say, I started to wonder what I want to do in my life, except being an osteologist, an archaeologist. I thought, what would I do? What would I look back at in the age of 80? What would I more do in my life? And then I came back to a vision and a thought that I had before studying archaeology, becoming a nurse, because I wanted to work international for humanitarian organization. So I went back 20 years almost to the wish that I had during that time, 1992, to become a nurse. So in 2013, almost more than 20 years later, I came back to that vision and said to myself, okay, let's do that. That means that I ended my position I had at one of the universities in Sweden as an osteology teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
I said, how scary is that?
It was very scary.
Yeah.
I was this expert, this hero. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, okay, let's do something completely different. So I ended my job there, came back to Stockholm because this was not in Stockholm. I'm from Stockholm, I live in Stockholm, and started to study becoming a nurse. 3 years. So I finished the studies 2017. I could name myself a nurse. And I stood there. I was 50 years during that time. And first of all, I remember saying to myself, or wonder, who wants to employ me? I'm 50 years old. I have this background as an archaeologist, osteologist, with a PhD in osteology. I'm a nurse with 50. Who wants to have me with my very, very different background than other nurses? But the thing was, they all wanted me because I was 50. I had lots of experience. I have all this knowledge with me from my past career, teaching, lots of students. So I became a nurse. I was working as a nurse for 7-8 years. And then I again thought, what would I more do than just working as a nurse? So I missed working with students, teaching, researching. So I went back to the university again. But now I'm working at one of the universities in Sweden, but not as a teacher in osteology, but in nursing instead, which is completely different, of course. But all these years, it's almost 30 years since I actually started studying archaeologist. And when I came back to school again, 2013-14, becoming a nurse, it was the most, what would I say, challenging, difficult period in my life. As you said, to leave that behind, being an expert, being some kind of a hero for the students with my expertise, and became, for me, I was, all of a sudden, I had nothing. My feeling was that I had nothing. I was a nurse, completely new, with 50 years of age, with a lot of knowledge, but in this field, I had none knowledge from my perspective. It was very difficult. Of course, also rewarding in the end, but during that time, I lost a bit of my identity, I must say.
Thank you for honestly sharing that with us. This is incredibly inspiring. And I feel like I can kind of relate to it because I felt like I have been someone in Germany with my expertise, my reputation, and then I moved abroad to the United States and I had to start new over again. And then I switched my job while being in the United States, started something completely new, becoming a death investigator, being the new person again at the age of, I think, 42, you know. And so I can so relate to so many things you said, recreating a new identity, feeling like you had it all and you lost it all just to follow your heart and your passion. But it's also so inspiring because, you know, we are not the same we have been 10 years ago or we even were 20 years ago. I'm not even the same person I was yesterday. So your story, I feel like, inspires, hopefully, you know, everyone who listens here, to follow your heart, follow your dreams. You only have one life, and you can make it at any age. So
you can, but I must reply, that is that many people said to me it was brave. During that time I said, no, it's not brave. I just follow my I know my capacity. I just want to do something more with my capacity. But now I can see it was brave. It was very brave to leave something, to start a new life. But I also say to myself and to people who say to me that everything is possible, because for me, everything is not possible. You do have possibilities, always, but it's not the same possibilities maybe. I do believe that you need to think, what can I do now with 50 or 55? Today I'm 58, because possibilities change. They do change. And I'm not that person that said everything is possible, because it's not actually. I think you do need to sit down and really figure out what you want to do, the costs, the reward, because it is difficult to change your life the way I did. So I mean, I did that with 48. Maybe I would never do that again with 58. I would never do the same. But now I have other possibilities. Not the same, but other possibilities. And that is your responsibility to figure out the possibilities that you have during specific different periods in your life. Because they change.
No,
everything is not always possible.
But I personally also believe possibilities open up when there's a strong desire, and you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
But you said that you eventually came back to teaching because you found out how much you miss it. But going back to your first teaching position, or your first position, when your career started, what made you what made you pursuing a career in osteology in the first place, or archaeology? Do you remember? Was this like a Indiana Jones movie, or
No,
what was it that
actually.
sparked your interest?
When I became a student in archaeology, I know from the beginning that I wanted to be an osteologist. I really knew that from the beginning. My father, he loves archaeology and history. I think I got lots of things from him, the interest that he had. And then osteology in specific, because I remember I was in a museum in Stockholm and they had a skeleton behind a stair, some very strange place for a skeleton in a glass box. And I went there many times. I just looked at the skeleton and I thought to myself, I wonder what information this skeleton actually can give us. And then I also was in London, 86, at the British Museum, and they had an exhibition of, I don't know the English word if I pronounce it correct, but bog bodies?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the correct word? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of these beautiful bog bodies, and also again, my interest I just thought, how interesting is the skeleton, the bodies, and what information they can tell was just something that intrigued me. So when I became an archaeologist, I just completely continued with the osteology, the studies in osteology. I'm very, as a person, I'm very determined. I'm very determined. It was osteology or nothing. And I became an osteologist, which I never regretted. And even today, being a nurse, I am an osteologist. In my heart, I'm an osteologist. I love osteology. I still love and fascinates about the skeleton and all the information that we can get from them. Because I always... Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, because I always tell people that what we do actually as osteologists, we kind of rebuild people we make them alive with all the information that we can get, except the name. Mm-hmm. Most of the time we don't get the name because the skeletons that I worked with is 2,000 years back, 5,000 years old maybe. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we do get the name. I'm going to tell you one of these stories that we actually got the name later on.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
Does this have to do with working in Wyoming?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
So
yes.
everyone who likes Yellowstone can already, be excited about the little case story that we will talk about.
It's a little case story. It was actually, I think, in Colorado, in border of Wyoming, up very north. Because as an osteologist, I always love travel. I'm a traveler. I like to travel. I like languages. I like to move. And being an osteologist gives you this opportunity actually to do that, because the skeleton is a skeleton. You can actually analyze a skeleton wherever, all over the place, all over the world, globally. It's the same. The
and
sex,
I think
the age.
And I think how people probably picture your job is a mix of Indiana Jones and Lara Croft.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe.
And I mean,
or bones.
Yeah.
Do you see? Do you know
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
A mixture of that, absolutely.
Yeah. So you agree?
Which is maybe not the truth.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit it is the truth. Yeah. Some kind of Indiana Jones maybe lives in me as well. Absolutely.
The adventurous part.
Yes, absolutely.
So what was we already touched Wyoming briefly, so why don't we stay with that case? So you traveled a lot, and during one of those osteological travels, it brought you to Wyoming, correct? Do you mind just sharing with our audience, what happened there? Why were you there, and what is this case that we briefly...
It was me and a colleague, Ylva. We went to Wyoming. We were invited by Charles Reher from University of Wyoming. Mm-hmm. He's an expert anthropology and worked with Paleo-Indian culture. So we were there, we were supposed to analyze, which was did, bison bones from Paleo-Indian culture.
Mm-hmm.
But being there during the time, this was summer 2001. And this actually summer of 6 weeks was one of the top 3 periods in my life that had the greatest impact in my life. Really, it was such a fantastic summer. And when I was there, we got a phone call from one of the ranch owners in Colorado. Because during that time we have lots of rain. Not many days, but you know it maybe. When it rains, it can really rain. It was lots of rain.
When it rains, it pours.
It rains, really. And she called and said, you know, I found a skeleton on my property. And we went there, and it was a skeleton from a human being, absolutely. And we started to dig out the skeleton. It was a beautiful skeleton, completely complete. And under the head of the skeleton, we found a stone. And when we picked up the stone, beneath the skull of the skeleton, and turned the stone, it has the name on of the one who actually was laying there.
On the stone was the name?
Yeah, they graved, what do you call it, engrave? Is that the
Mm-hmm.
English word for it? The name of the boy, it was a boy, James. His name was James. He died if I not remember, it was 1850 something, on 4th of July. He died. Very strangely, died 4th of July. And this was a 15-year-old boy. We didn't see any pathologists. We do believe that he died. He was one of because this actually, where the skeleton was found, was on the Oregon Trail, where the immigrants went. So we do believe that this was a boy, maybe from Ireland, maybe from England, and he died maybe from just a normal, what we call normal disease today, maybe pneumonia or something, because the skeleton didn't actually show any sign of pathology that we could see.
So no trauma.
Died during the route, no trauma, not at all, but he died on the route, on this Oregon Trail, the trail that the immigrants used then. And they buried him, and the family then engraved his name and the date when he died on the stone. For me, being from Sweden, it was also my first time in USA. It was the first time. And I remember when we took the plane to Denver. I was a little skeptical, I must say, to USA before I came there. I was. But as soon as I put my feet on the ground outside the airport of Denver, I was just I fell in love with the USA. I mean, I just embraced it. So this was such a great time, just being able to analyze the skeleton, to be there when they actually excavated the skeleton, the first Americans who came to USA. It was such an amazing experience, I must say, that I could be a part of that.
Yeah. It
during my
sounds
time there.
very touching, and also,
It was very
picturing
touching.
that he might have been there with parents or family members.
Yes.
That grieved.
They
his
came there,
passing.
they like many Swedish people did, that many Irish people did, Italian people did,
German.
to find luck. The Germans to find luck, to find this, the country
life.
that a new life. They came from very difficult times, very difficult in Sweden, and they went there to find luck. And this family then lost a child. It was very, very touching.
It is a reminder that this country is built on hope and sweat and tears.
It is.
It's very
because
precious.
as they experienced, this was maybe one of many, many negative experiences they had. Not only the loss of a child, but also then how difficult it was for the European to come there and build this new life. It was not the land of glory, it was very challenging for them, really challenging.
And what did you do with his remains after you discovered
they took them
him?
to the laboratory, and now we analyzed it more properly in the labor, but now I don't know actually where he is. I don't know, because then I went out in the field again and excavated my bison bones. I was just then in the first day to analyze the skeleton. I don't know actually then what happened to him. And also a part of osteology and archaeology, you know, we excavate skeletons, we analyze them, and in Sweden, many of these skeletons are just in magazines, in boxes, you know. It's also
they
very
remain in boxes, yeah.
Oh, they remain. Yes, I don't know what I think about that, but that's the truth. Then.
Well, luckily, you know, at least in Germany, we now have huge repatriation projects, you know, so we try to repatriate. But
Sweden as well.
Yeah.
And we sometimes we also rebury them. Very, very seldom, but we do rebury them again. But that doesn't happen that often, actually. It doesn't.
And any interesting that the bison bones told you?
The bison bones. We were in one of the canyons there in Colorado, you know, where the Indians they pressed the bisons to fell over the what do you call it, the cliff. So we found the bison's bone in lots of huge piles.
I didn't know that.
The bison's bone. Yeah, they did. They forced them over the cliff because that was an easier way to kill them and to get many bisons in one during the same time. So we did lots of bison's bones actually then. And what you can do, of course, then, which I do, because I do analyze human skeletons and even animal skeletons. I'm educated for doing both. My study as an osteologist in Sweden includes both. So we analyze the bison's bone from age, from cut marks, how did they cut the bisons, which part maybe they found better than others for the meaty part or the less meaty part, etc.
And any interesting clues that you remember that you gained from analyzing, you know, those bisons that were used for
no, I would say that was not any surprising result. I don't believe. I don't remember finding any surprisingly result or analyzing what I did and my colleague did. It ended up in a book from this Charles Rear, this anthropologist in the University of Wyoming, and he used, of course, our result in books and conferences, etc. But for me, I don't remember any surprising or any surprises or you know, highlights or anything, except for me being there, which was fantastic, but not from the result.
From knowing your background and, you know, the different stations throughout your career, I know that you have many career highlights.
I do.
And one, I assume, because it would have been for me, was probably also doing excavations in Pompeii.
Yes.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
Would you mind sharing with us a little more about that? Maybe explaining where Pompeii exactly is and what you did there, and what is Pompeii?
I said that my time in Colorado, 2001, is one of top 3 periods in my life, which I really treasure. It had a great impact on me as a person, and private and professional. And the second one here is Pompeii. I was in Pompeii 2005 the first time. Pompeii is a city in Italy, in Europe. It's south of Naples. Pompeii was one of the flourishing cities during the Roman period 2,000 years back. They're not quite sure actually what kind of city Pompeii was. If it was for the Romans, like kind of a what to call it, a recreation place for the Romans. But it was a flourishing city. Maybe, they're not quite sure, maybe 10,000 to 20,000 inhabitants during that time, 2,000 years back. But what happened in Pompeii is that Vesuvius, a volcano, just very close to the city Pompeii, had an eruption, 79 after Christ. And during this eruption, the ashes buried all of the city and other neighboring city as well. Cities, houses, or cities. They were not cities except from Pompeii. It was kind of urban, small communities, I would say, and houses on the countryside were buried from these ashes. So after 2 years, the volcano had eruption 79 in October, they know, and maybe a couple of days later, everything was just covered by the ashes. Meters of layers of ashes. And they forgot Pompeii. The citizens that didn't die, they flew, they left the area, went north to Rome, other small societies, urban societies, and forgot everything about Pompeii. Until maybe during the 16th century, they digged and found. Actually, they were digging aqueducts during the 16th century, and during that time they found remains of something that looked like houses. And then they again just didn't do anything about it. But then during the 18th century, they really found Pompeii again. And they started to dig, excavate this city. I mean, it's really a city. In Sweden, if you compare Pompeii, the layers of houses, it was a city with everything that you actually included in cities. It's houses, it's this streets, for selling. It's tavernas, restaurants. You have the bathing, what you call it, the bathing houses. Do you call that in English? This
I
indoor
guess
bathing.
Yeah.
They had amphitheaters for theater, for gladiators. And if you look in Sweden during that time, Sweden 2,000 years ago, we still have houses, long houses, the cows living in the end of the house and the people in the rest of the house. And then you have Pompeii. They have aqueducts. They have this mosaic, this painting on the walls, They had tavernas, as I said. They have amphoras where they kept the olives, the olive oil. It was a high society, really high level of society.
They also already had like sewer systems, right?
Yes, they did. They did.
Very fascinating.
And compare that to Sweden.
I know.
But the cows
Germany,
still living in the houses.
Yeah.
Maybe as well in Germany.
Yeah.
And in Sweden, if you look at the same time, we don't have any actually settlements from that time. We do have burial grounds where they buried the people, but we don't have any settlements from that time. But Pompeii is like, the first time I went there, 2005, when I went into this portal, I cried. Because for me, as an archaeologist, it was such a great moment to be a part of this. I was there as a job as an osteologist. I was supposed to excavate and analyze skeletons. And when I entered, it was just like I was entering a city. And when I used, it was the only thing that didn't exist was the roof of the houses. Except from that, it was houses, streets,
So you could walk through the houses?
Yes. With this amazing mosaic and paintings and statues. And then you have this Vesuvius in the background. And Vesuvius is still a volcano that's active. The last eruption that Vesuvius had is actually during the Second World War, 1944, I think it was. It's not that long ago, and it's still active.
And were any other eruptions as bad as it was in 79?
Not
or as deadly?
That is not that is actually recorded. But what happened actually, because Pompeii was maybe flourishing from maybe, let's say, 204 Christ, before Christ. And what happens before that, when they didn't have any settlement there, no people living there, I don't know actually then what they found in the layers of the ashes or the earth. But they did have one earthquake in 69 after, and they were still actually renovating houses when the Vesuvia had its eruption in 79. And the thing is, let's say that maybe 10,000 people lived in Pompeii during that time. It could be 20,000. They don't know. Most of the people did escape. They had the time to escape, because when Vesuvius was erupting, it was a pillar, a large, what do you call it? A pillar? Do you call it? No. Ash.
Or column, or
maybe two kilometers up in the air, and instead stood there maybe for 1-2 days, and then it just collapsed, and then the city was buried. And during these 2 days, most of the people had the time to escape. But like in any other city, where you have anything actually then, like natural causes, disasters, people tend to stay because they want to protect their properties.
And I can second guess that, because when we had especially Hurricane Ian in 2022, a lot of people stayed and bitterly regretted this afterwards, because, they lost their lives, they lost, the family members, they lost properties. But I think until it has happened to you before, you underestimate what might happen, and you think you're, invincible, or you want to protect your property, or maybe you're sick and you can't leave, right? You're bedridden.
As well. So actually, but many left, because from these maybe 10,000 or 20,000 inhabitants, only skeletons from 1,000 people have been found.
Well, but still, 1,000 people
It's
die,
10,000 people is 10,000 people, absolutely. And you can also see it adults, it's children. You can see mothers having their child in the arms, trying to protect them from this very poisonous gas coming from this collapsing pillar, But they died. They suffocated, and they were actually burning from inside by inhaling this very hot, of course, poisonous gas. It was a very, very, very difficult death.
So very cruel and painful.
Very cruel. Very cruel.
So it's not that they became unconscious and then it happened. That's very sad.
Unfortunately not. And some of them were of course under the ashes. The meters of ashes were found then. But 1,000 people, young people, elderly people, slaves, what you think were slaves, and children died then. The one who stayed, who wanted to protect the properties, and as you said, the one maybe who couldn't flee of sickness or any other causes then, of course.
And did you find the actual bones, or was it more a cast formed by the hot ashes?
It was casts, not only, also bones. Inside houses, they also found bones, skeletons, not the cast. Because if you have seen pictures from Pompeii, and the one who listen now, who haven't seen pictures from Pompeii, I think you should look for pictures in Google. You're going to see the casts of people who died, and you can see the teeth within the cast, for example, because the skeleton is inside the cast. And then the cast also shows, one of them shows this woman, mother, holding a child, actually above, to protect the child from the ashes. But then they both died, of course, then. You can see a man holding his nose like this to protect himself from the gases as well. I think you should look in the internet to find pictures from Pompeii. It's very touching, it's very interesting, it's a very interesting period in history, because if Pompeii was not buried, if Vesuvius didn't have the eruption in 79, I think Pompeii would have been destroyed, like any other cities from the ancient time. Rebuilding, destroying, they moved maybe to other cities and forgot about Pompeii. This is also, from a historical point of view, something that gave us so much information about the Roman period, the Roman Empire during that time, that without Pompeii, we would have so much less information of the Roman Empire. But of course, for the people who lived there, this was a tragedy. Absolutely.
But I feel like, this is where we can connect the dots to the case in Wyoming, I mean, yes, it is an interesting finding when you look at history, but it's an individual fate.
Yes.
And you witness...
Yes.
I feel like it's a very intimate moment where you witness a very fatal part of someone's life, where they were vulnerable. The mother holding her child above her head. I mean, that's telling us something about how caring she was, how desperate she was.
Absolutely.
She sits there, she hears her child crying, being in pain, and knowing she can't do anything. And I feel like
I think she knew that they're gonna die. But at least she wanted to protect her child as long as possible from this. It's very touching, actually.
Even though this happened, almost 2,000 years ago, I feel like these were human beings like you and I. They had emotions, and
of course,
just it's a very, very intimate view that we actually get into someone's life.
And be a part of that for me. I was there 2005 until 2007. And being a part of that, for me, it was just such a highlight for me in my life as a person, as an individual. Not only being an archaeologist and an osteologist, really. It had a really great and immense impact on my life, being there.
I just remember, I had classical Latin in school, so we would, read contemporary literature. So Pompeii, I think, has been this one fascinating thing that is like a Damocles sword all over. Over the all Europeans' minds or heads. So I think that you were allowed to help there is such an honor and such a very unique opportunity. Only a handful of people in the world, were basically allowed to do that. And you described earlier to me that those quarters were divided by countries, right? So there was the Swedish excavation, and they called it the Swedish quarter, and so on. Did you still exchange your results or your findings with the other archaeological teams from other countries, or was it really more like the Swedish state, with the Swedish and so on?
During that time, surprisingly, I asked the same question to my project manager, but the thing is, they do not collaborate as much as I think they should. They don't, because they do have, the English have their quarter, the Finnish have their quarter, we have ours, the Norwegian, the Germans, the Japanese. But the connection between them was not properly settled, for my opinion, because Pompeii is one city, not different quarters. It is one city.
Yeah, you have to look
amazingly,
at the whole
they
and
don't.
not just...
Yes. They were very, much just working by themselves. Not together.
And just as a personal opinion, since I'm, from the same subject, do you think it has to do with people want to cherry pick and have the best results for themselves, for their career, or do you think...
You know how it is, because you're where I am at university, I've been there, you're still there. It's like that. Isn't it like that when you work in a university? That is the negative side of working in a university. You just want to have, like this to protect everything. I'm not that kind of person. I think that we should, connect more. We should work more to collaborate more.
I know
but
that
I do believe you're right.
You have been member of many interdisciplinary and also international teams. So I know that you're a team player, and I think this is how it should be done. But then there's the pressure of pushing, research results out there and publications.
But the thing is, If you look at Pompeii, they still have, the Swedish project is still there, the Japanese are still there. They do have their own quarters, which means that nobody else can get their result. They have their result from this quarter. It's not a competition because I'm not in this quarter where the Japanese are. They have their results. So actually we don't compete, which I think we don't compete. We should collaborate because my findings, my result, maybe can give their result something.
Yeah.
Aha, you have the same. It's not the same, and why not? This is how I think we should work, of course. Because for them, Pompeii was one city, not divided in different quarters, like we do today.
And those findings that you already, discussed earlier, especially with the slaves staying there, having to protect the property, does this tell you something about the demographics and, the social life in Pompeii as well?
It does. The thing is that you can find, we know that, slaves were there, of course. They had slaves. Women were there, children were there, elderly male, younger male. I would say that the demographic is just a normal city demographic, I would say. They were all represented. It is not like the rich Romans came from Rome living there. It was all kinds, of a families or demographic. It was the more richer people and the poorer people. Because it's very obvious in Pompeii. You have the streets, but you have the banks, the more luxurious tavernas, the restaurant, and then you have the quarters with less rich people, narrow streets, completely different houses. You have the burial, the graves from rich people and from poorer people. The rich people inside Pompeii have this, very, what you call it, the high stones, the portals, just for one family. And then you have the poorer people with a little small stone, You have the diversity in Pompeii, really. Like in any normal city, like in any other city, I would say, from the demographic point of view. And
do you remember any especially challenging aspect while doing those excavations?
I must say, I also must inform you that Pompeii was excavated, most of Pompeii was excavated already during the 19th century.
Okay.
What we do there now is that we don't excavate in that sense anymore. What we do is that we protect, we document, we do excavate floors, maybe what you asked me before, when you can see the chariots where they were going on the streets, where they had the chariots. We excavate that, but we don't excavate quarters anymore because they are already excavated during the 19th century. They did a lot of things, good work there, but what they also did was during the 19th century, they took the mosaic, they took the paintings from the walls, you just cracked them, they hacked them down, to take them to themselves or to the museum in Naples. There are now many of them, but many of them vanished during this time as well. But they did a great job, I must say, during the 19th century.
But as a visitor, you can also go there and visit the actual Pompeii.
Yes.
Right.
You enter the same Pompeii that I did in 2005. You can see everything that I did. You enter this city. And when the tourists there, if you just close your eyes a little bit, you can imagine that it's actually then 2,000 years back, because there's lots of people in the streets, visiting the tavernas. You cannot, of course, not buy anything there, but, it's like, it's a living city still today, which I find very fascinating, even if it's 2,000 years old. And it's ruins, but as I said, compared to Sweden, where we have this nothing from the same time, it's amazing. And I do believe that Pompeii is one of the world's highest visited tourist attraction.
Destination.
I must say, destination, worldwide.
Yeah,
is
I
Pompeii.
think there is just some kind of fascination with that specific,
It is.
event. And
But what I think, Manny, yeah.
Did you also find animals buried in ashes?
I did. Okay. Yes, animals that nobody took with them, that were in the stables, that couldn't flee. Yes, you can see also these casts of animals. And I was actually there for excavating, analyzing animal bones, not human bones. Because my job was to analyze the bones and then to figure out what they ate, how did they slaughter the animals, and where did they slaughter the animals, inside Pompeii or outside Pompeii. And what I found was they ate lots of piglets, pig, chicken, fish from the Mediterranean, of course, goats. They didn't eat meat from cattle, because cattle during that time was more for offering and for the wagons then, to carry things. What do you call it in English?
The chariots?
These chariots, yes, exactly. So I didn't find any meat from cattle that they have been eating.
So they were holy in the meaning of offering it to the gods? Okay, interesting.
Yes.
And what about having animals at home like dogs and cats?
They did have lots of dogs.
Okay.
We found a dog in one of the streets outside our quarter. It was a dog that died during the eruption. A dog with lots of pathologies, because this dog had cancer. I found on the skeleton, and many of the bones show signs of cancer. But was still alive. I mean, the dog didn't die from cancer. We think it died actually from the eruption. Lots of dogs, absolutely. And still lots of dogs in Pompeii.
You said earlier that they had a Colosseum as well.
Yes. The amphitheater.
Yeah.
For the gladiators.
Did you find anything that matches what we know from the movie Gladiator, for example? Or, I mean, was it completely empty? Did they empty it before the eruption or the ashes came down?
I don't believe that they found any skeletons, from my knowledge. This could be wrong. But I don't think that they found many skeletons, trapped gladiators, for example. But that is just maybe a lack in my knowledge. Because they found these 1,000 skeletons, inside still. But they did have absolutely they did have a gladiator school. They have a gladiator school in Pompeii, absolutely, where they educated the gladiators. And which of course then was having this show, or what you can call it, in the amphitheaters, absolutely.
So gladiator school basically meant daily training, unlike...
Daily training.
Okay.
Gymnastic, daily training, absolutely.
And were those gladiators mainly slaves as well, or people that they captured somewhere, or people who came there to earn money by...
I think it was both. I imagine it was both, actually, then. But that part of Pompeii, I'm not so good in that, actually, then.
Okay. So it wasn't the Swedish quarter?
No, it was not our quarter, and even if it's not our quarter, I do lecture a lot of Pompeii, for schools, on libraries, etc. here in Sweden. But my knowledge is not in that detail. But of course, I know lots of Pompeii, absolutely. But whether they actually was hired, the gladiators, or if they only were slaves, I'm not quite sure about. But I think it was both, actually. I believe it was both.
And then there is this one iconic picture or image of the two, what is called the two lovers. Do you know what I'm referring to? Have you seen that? And is this a correct interpretation that these were two people who were, hugging themselves while dying?
I think so, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If you find, even if it's not the two lovers, you can find family laying together, holding their arms around each other to protect themselves, because they knew that they were dying. absolutely. Absolutely. The last minutes of these families or people must have been horrifying.
So there's, if you were there when it finally came down, there's no way that anyone survived, right?
No.
Yeah.
Because the windows or the doors, the ashes was meters high. I mean, they had nothing. No, they couldn't escape. It was too late. It was too late.
And how wide was it? Like a mile or more?
Then you need to say me. You explain what a mile is.
Was it kilometers or more meters?
I think it was maybe 2 kilometers high. I think. I mean, not the ashes, of course.
No, I mean wide, like how much from this? How big is the city? How big and wide?
How much
was
is the city?
Or the area that got covered. I mean, is this a radius of kilometers?
It is big. Yeah, absolutely. It's big. Absolutely. It's like a small city. It's like, you have been to Stockholm, to the old city in Stockholm. It's kind of like the same size.
Okay.
It's a big city, actually.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They have a wall surrounding it for defense, of course. And you can walk through it. It is big.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
And then you did even more than, coming to Wyoming, helping there, going to Pompeii. Let's, touch base with when you had your career change and you wanted to become a nurse. So you worked as a nurse in a hospital, correct?
Yes.
And what was your specialty there?
Infection.
Okay, interesting.
I worked 5 years with patients diagnosed with different kinds of infections.
But that was all pre-COVID, correct? Or did you still work as a nurse when we had the COVID pandemic?
I did, in the same place. When the COVID started, I was working there. And my 2 wards, it was 2 wards for patient with infections, they became COVID wards. So during 2 years, I was a COVID nurse, you could say.
Okay. And that was probably extremely challenging, right?
It was very challenging, actually. Many people in Sweden during the COVID, I don't know how it was actually in America, in USA, but if you compare to Europe, Sweden was very... We took a different pathway than other countries in Europe, because we took this more, not laid back, not at all, but we were never closed down. We didn't. We continued. We continued. You had to wear this hat, but we did these face masks. But we still worked. We still used the subways, the buses. We didn't close down. We never did. The people, when they are talking about the COVID in Sweden during the most difficult 2 years, and compared to what I was experiencing in a hospital, well, 2 completely experiences of this time. Because for me, it was challenging. It was difficult. Having all this, clothes on, protecting shield, on, and going into patient, dying patient, old patient, with dementia, for example, and trying to communicate with them with all this, protecting. It was very difficult. We all got COVID several times, of course. Many of my colleagues very difficult. Also ended up in the hospital, some of my colleagues. I also, of course, got COVID from my patients. But otherwise, we lived not a normal life, but we continued living in Sweden. We did.
Yeah, this is similar to how I experienced it here in Florida. I felt like, we continued living life. We had social distancing, they recommended the mask.
Yes.
They recommended, the vaccinations. Some people had to do the mandatory vaccination. But in comparison to what I learned, especially from my family in Germany, it was different here. It was more laid back, to use your words. But I know that in Germany they really had like a curfew for a month. Even Christmas or when there was a funeral, you know, they could only invite a very small number of people. People who had
But that was the same, I
terminated,
think, in Sweden as well.
okay, people who had a terminating disease died alone in the hospital because family members were not allowed to visit. So terrible impact on, you know.
But that was actually the same in Sweden in the beginning, when we didn't know so much about the COVID itself. It was actually the same in Sweden, that many old people were dying by themselves.
Yeah.
And that is actually something that we in Sweden think, and Germany, you as well then of course, which is very difficult to think of, that we were not allowed to visit them. But that changed during the 2 years. That was more in the beginning, I would say.
Okay.
Than it was not during all the 2 years then that was intense in Sweden.
And did you have
But,
mandatory vaccinations, especially for personnel in the hospitals, or was it choice?
We needed, but it was a choice in the community society. It was a choice.
Okay.
For me, it was mandatory then. Absolutely. But it's if you compare to Italy and Europe, for example, which was very locked down during this time, it was not at all the same in Sweden. Not at all, actually, then. And Sweden during this time, we were kind of other countries or continents were debating Sweden, the Swedish then, how we did this. It was very either negative or positive. It was a lot of debate during our then way to do this. Absolutely, in the media. It was the stupid Swedish or the good Swedish then, actually, then.
But do you happen to know, did you really have more COVID cases because of the laid backness, or maybe even less COVID cases, or
I think
just
we had
the
less,
same?
actually.
Yeah.
It was not more. I think actually we didn't have more. Maybe the same or even less.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
Imagine
Even if Sweden had this more, not laid back, but more not harsh as other European countries, it was a difficult period for all of us. Of course it was. And for me, working with this, it was very difficult. Absolutely.
and
as a nurse, you know, one part of a nurse is just to kind of be close to patients, to build this relationship. And it was so difficult to do that with this, you know, equipment that I had to wear every day and have this distance, you know. I wanted to be close, but I couldn't. It was very difficult, actually.
Yeah, and we know how much physical touch can actually do, you know, in a good way, and yeah.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
Thank you for sharing even those moments with us. And then, you know, coming back to how caring you are, you know, how much empathy you have for other human beings. I don't think we can really talk about it, but I just wanted to mention that you also, you know, went on missions for Doctors Without Borders to do something good somewhere else.
And that is actually why I was becoming a nurse, was just for this purpose, as I said. I had one purpose, to work abroad, international, for Doctors Without Borders then, which I have done twice.
And for how long are those missions?
It depends. It could be 1 year, could be 6 months. And my mission was 3 months in Greece, on this refugee camp, and in Lithuania, also in a refugee camp for 3 months. I was vaccinating children then from the camps.
And I can imagine that this must have been challenging, but maybe also very, very rewarding.
It was rewarding.
Would you say that it changed you, whatever you witnessed there or experienced, that this had an impact similar to...
Absolutely. I think even without this, I think I have a very understanding of how difficult people can have it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, coming from countries with war, for example, I think I have a very big, understanding and empathy. And of course, these two, the times that I went out with Doctors Without Borders gave me more of this understanding then, and humbleness that you get for people actually coming from very difficult situations and contexts, countries, life, wanting to have something better, something else. They're coming with their families, children, to as the one, James, that I was excavated in Colorado 2001. Mm-hmm. The same. They also wanted to build this new life in America. And the same here then. They want to build a new life in Europe. Yep. Because many of the migrants that I worked with in Greece or Lithuania came from Afghanistan or from the Middle Eastern countries, to build a better life. I think I have an understanding for them. More now, of course, after my 2 missions for Doctors Without Borders, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the cycle comes to an end here. Your case in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
my people who wanted to migrate for a better future and risk everything, and now it's the same situation there. Yes. And you just shared with us how traumatic in a way your work as a nurse was during especially the COVID pandemic. And I can imagine that those fates that you witnessed, the people you got to know, and the compassion you have for or had for them and their situation, that was probably partly traumatic as well. How did you deal with that? So not getting lost in those traumas that you're witnessing, remaining like a positive, mentally and emotionally stable person. Any advice for anyone else who is in a similar job situation or personal situation? Anything, that helped you to remain healthy, mentally healthy, emotionally healthy?
I mean, Doctors Without Borders, they have a very stable, health service for workers like me.
Oh, okay.
Even before, during, and after. So when I came back from my missions, I had the opportunity to see psychologists. Okay. And even under my mission, I could talk with psychologists, or at least, staff that I trusted, and colleagues, and also before, because they know that sent away in difficult missions, as you say, have a great impact on you. But I think they are a organization with high responsibility for the workers, really. But it is difficult, absolutely. But I also think that my age helps me. I mean, being maybe 25 or would have been difficult maybe for me. But coming there with then 55, 56, with my life experience, with me, my personality, me being me, Carola, helped me as well, I think. Absolutely. But also the colleagues, of course. But it is difficult.
And I know this is actually, unfortunately, very rare that, people get help, support when they are working specific lines of work. And I can just imagine how it is working, especially with children, a very vulnerable group of our society. And then, you hear those horrible stories, like what happens to especially children in those camps, especially when they're orphans. There's a lot of trafficking, there's a lot of abuse. Yes. And I can just, imagine that this must be very challenging.
Yes. If you have seen the camps, if you have seen pictures of the camps, the refugee camps, as you say, it's terrible places for anyone to live in, especially for kids. And it did happen horrible things for kids when I was there in the camp. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, imagine yourself being a child with parents that are emotionally very, very distressed and that cannot protect the children maybe as they would and want to. It must be terrible for all the families. Absolutely.
But then at the same time, that brings me back to the story of James. You know, when people sit on a big ship together to explore the New World. In America, we don't know what happened on those ships either. You know, if people were nice to each other, or if there was a lot of abuse and violence, and you know, children and old people are always the most vulnerable, groups of society. So it's
And I mean, these refugee camps in Greece, for example, where I was, many of them have been there for many years, 2 years maybe, in the same camp. And it becomes a small society itself. Mm-hmm. And in any other societies, you have everything. You have criminality. You have everything in these small societies. Even if it is a refugee camp, where you think maybe that everybody is there for the same reason, but it becomes kind of a little world itself, a little own society by itself.
But have you ever felt unsafe working there?
No. I never did. No, I never did. Because you know what? Doctors Without Borders, they don't have clinics inside the refugee camp because they don't work where people are locked in. It's one of the principles. So we have our clinic outside the camp. I was inside the camp several times, of course. But any other of the organizations in Greece, they worked inside the refugee camp. But Doctors Without Borders are very, very, very specific. We don't work where people are locked in. That is against our principles.
And then
that made that we were more safe outside, of course.
And then when your mission is over, you go back home to your home country, and you have changed because that experience changed you. But you go back and everything is as it was when you left. Is this challenging as well?
Normal.
Is it adapting?
But the thing is, I mean, even if everything is normal, because everyone and everything is just like before I went. Everything. But
you are not the same anymore.
Yeah, I am not the same. And the thing is, it just makes me somewhat a more what would you say it? A human person that is more of everything. I mean, I don't know the English word. I cannot describe it, but I have experiences. I did this. It makes me not a better person, not at all, but a more. I don't know. I cannot explain it actually. Then, so even if everybody else is the same.
But you are changed.
I have more. I changed, yes, and no. I'm also the same actually then, but I have more knowledge. I have more experience. I have more empathy. I have more understanding of other people, and which makes me, in some way, a better person. Absolutely. Even if I'm the same, I'm a more developed person. Maybe you can say.
And is
with
this
all
why?
these more ingredients coming inside me.
And is this why you decided to go back to teaching and maybe share those experiences, share how this shaped you, and to spread your wisdom and everything that you gained from all those experiences? Or do you remember the specific moment when you said, you know what, I love nursing, but I want to go back into teaching? Do you remember what it was?
I do. I said in the beginning that in my heart, osteology still lives. I'm an osteologist and also a nurse. It's not the opposite. I'm not a nurse and also an osteologist. No, I'm still an osteologist. And what I wanted is to go back. Yes, maybe what you describe. I wanted to use my new knowledge, my new experiences in a way which I liked, in a way that I did good. That means teaching, in a way that was more maybe rewarding for me than being a nurse.
Mm. But you are now teaching a lot of things that, like
yes.
anatomy, like things that have
yes.
to do with nursing, right? So you are not...
Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is that is, as you said before, everything goes kind of in a circle. Because I still use my expertise as an osteologist, because I do teach in bones, in skeletons, in paleo oral pathology, which is my thesis actually. I use my expertise, absolutely, that I had before. I use now when I teach nursing, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you did this career change, it sounded as if you're redefining yourself, and in a way you did, but actually maybe you were just polishing the version that was already there, to become a better,
yes,
or even better,
because yes, because I said when I was during the time when it was very difficult for me, my change in life, I said I just changed my life, and then somebody said to me, a dentist actually, who was working with me for my thesis, said, Carola, you didn't change your life. You're just taking another step. You're continuing your life with new knowledge, with other knowledges, with new knowledge, with your new experiences. You're not changing your life, which I thought I did. And that's why it became so abrupt. So it became very difficult for me, because I thought it was just a completely change, poof, it ended, and then something new started. And she said, no, Carola, it's not like that. You're continuing, but you take another step upwards. Because I thought I took one step down, but she said, no, you're taking another level. You're continuing leveling your education. And I need to see it in that way, of course.
So you don't regret a thing, right? Looking back in hindsight.
Do you want an honest answer or not?
No, an honest sense. I'm German, an honest
I
answer.
do regret.
Not sugarcoating.
I do regret.
Okay.
No, I do regret it sometimes. Absolutely.
And what do you regret?
Because even if I like being a nurse, I like educate students becoming a nurse, I am very much an osteologist still in my heart. I am really... I am really. It's about discussions, it's about the discipline, it's about research. It's so much more than just being an osteologist that comes with when you work at a university. It's the colleagues, it's so much. I do miss that in that discipline.
So you strayed away from that just to, in the end, learn that was actually where your heart belongs. But
yes.
that's a this is how we live. So learn. I think this is a very important life lesson, or lesson you learned about yourself or your desires. So
it is. But I also know, as I said in the beginning, you asked me why I took the step to become a nurse, and why I changed my life, and I said that I didn't want to regret. I didn't want to be there with 80. I look back at my life, thinking, what could have I done? And I know that if I wouldn't have done this, taken this step, I would have regretted.
You would still
I would have been there with 80 and said to myself, what would have happened if I did? So I needed to do this.
And you had the gut to do it, so...
I did.
But, we just learned today that you like to travel, you like the adventures, you have traveled to many more places than the ones that we touched here. But it feels like you have two hearts in one chest, I know that you like your home or your motherland. You are, Swedish, Sweden is beautiful, you like living there, but you also like to be, in other countries. So in a
Yes.
perfect world, would you continue doing this, mix between being at home in Sweden and being somewhere else, or would you move somewhere else if you could? Or,
If I could, I would again change my life. I would again
Interesting.
challenge myself by moving to Italy, which I love, and maybe buy a little, house somewhere. Maybe have 2 rooms for Airbnb or something, and have my olive trees. Yes, I would again change my life, because that's how I am. I want to challenge myself. I want to use my capacity. I want to live my life, I think. Absolutely. I would do that. If I have the money today, I would do that. Absolutely.
And do you think your love for Italy comes from the Pompeii excavations, or was this already there before?
No, I have it since I was 10.
Okay.
Kind of. I have been many, many times to Italy. I just love the culture, the language, I'm coming to Italy is like coming home. It's like, it's me. Absolutely.
And having worked with those ancient civilizations, then having seen the impact of, a refugee camp, for example, has all that in some way influenced how you see the world? Does that make sense how I mean it?
It does make sense, absolutely. It does influence me, how I see the world. But I think I have seen the world before in the same way that I see it today. Because I am a person that reads lots of newspapers. I travel a lot to poor countries, to rich countries, I have seen many things. But I think everything that you experience actually then somehow put more things in your vision, or in your how you see the world then actually then. Of course it has, of course. Because otherwise it would, like, I have been to Greece or Lithuania, worked with Doctor Borders and not perceive anything. I perceive a lot of things there, of course. Of course, absolutely. Everything you do. Even if you're still in Sweden not doing anything more than you do every day gives you something more, doesn't it?
Yeah,
to your life experience.
That is very deep, and yes, it does.
It
but
is
but you had your hands in our past, basically,
Yes.
And you've seen the rough parts of our present moment, not just the sugar-coated one. You've seen it all in a way.
Yes, it gives me a lot of knowledge, lots of understanding, lots of humbleness, I would say. People that have excavated, then skeletons, which I, as I said in the beginning, like to think of like I'm rebuilding them to life, to people again. Women who died through childhood, with children in their stomachs still, Of course, it gives me a perspective of life that is maybe more than other people have. Absolutely. 1,000 years back, 2,000 years back, 5,000 years back. All the skeletons are somehow within me still. Absolutely. Because there are people who lived before.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
And then last but not least, we have this category. You can't make this up. So some kind of unbelievable experiences. And I feel like you already shared so many with us, but is there perhaps one more from all of your experiences, your diverse career, anything, any unique, challenging situation, anything, another particular case that stands out in particular, something that is, again, truly unforgettable for you, anything you can share with us again, or something more, anything that comes to your mind?
I think the question is very suitable if I were, for example, a detective or something. where you meet, crime scenes, etc. Which I have. I have been working with the police several times in Sweden. Absolutely. When, for example, farmers have found skeletons on their field, for example. And once I worked with the police because someone wanted to buy a house, and the one who sold the house took this family and was showing the house and went to the attic. And up at the attic they found skeletons.
Oh, no.
And they contacted me. And because during this time a man was disappeared 25 years ago, before this, and was still vanished. A man that they think was actually then murdered during a kind of business, deal. The man is still vanished. They have not found him.
A missing person.
Yeah, he's still missing. Exactly. But what they thought was, when they found the skeleton on the attic, maybe it was this man. So I was contacted to analyze the skeleton. I have newspaper calling me, Some of the biggest newspapers in Sweden called me. Is this the man who went missing 25 years ago? And it was not. But I was on the front page of these newspapers, sitting with I think it was one of the, what you call it, femur. I had a femur in my hand, It was crazy. I looked like a crazy professor, actually, on this front page of the magazine, And everybody was waiting for the result from my analysis, if this was the man who was missing then. But it was not the man. He's still missing. They never found him, actually.
An anatomical specimen?
I think it was an anatomic specimen, because it was not only one person, it was bones from different persons.
Oh,
not only one.
Wow, but you never know, right?
It was not the missing man.
Yeah.
But I was in the newspapers. It was very, very, very big during that time, actually, then.
So what did your friends and family say when they saw you on page 1 with a femur in your hand like a cave woman?
Yeah, it's very, very strange, But actually one of my friends, I don't know how he did it, but he gave me this front page of one of the magazines as a gift, one of my birthday. So I still have it,
Oh, maybe you can give me a picture and I can, show it to our audience.
But the thing is, I don't have it. I have it, but it's not in Stockholm.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I cannot take a picture of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I can find it, actually, if I contact the newspaper itself. Yeah. But it's in a magazine, but not in Stockholm. It was just a crazy period, really. Crazy time. And otherwise, I don't have, like anything, like if I were a detective or something. I don't.
No, and I mean, I have, since I've worked on, graveyards from the Bronze Age myself, sometimes, you have a super interesting finding, in those historic burial grounds as well. So anything, but I mean, that was a good story already. So, and I bet you have like so many more.
But I did actually have one more story, a very short one. I was excavating a skeleton. It was archaeologists actually excavated a skeleton, and I got the skeleton to my desk in the laboratory, a female skeleton, and I just started, they took the skeleton with soil and everything, and the pelvis. I had the pelvis in front of me, and I just took away the soil, excavated my pelvis on my desk, on my table then, and then I found something very strange, teeth, very strange. And I thought to myself, what kind of teeth is this? Is it animal? No, it was not. I took it to the teeth and bones, small bones and teeth, to a pathologist. And he looked at it and said, you know what it is? It's a dermoid cyst. It's a twin. The twin from this female who didn't develop. It just have teeth, hair and bones. I, of course, then after 1,000 years, I just find the teeth and the bones still laying there within the soil that covered the pelvic. It's very, very amazing, actually, then I must say. Absolutely.
So my first thought was that she died during childbirth, but she gave birth to that one twin, and the other remained in her body, right?
I think it was her twin, not the child's twin.
Oh, no,
it was
I
her
understand.
twin.
Okay. So when
Yes,
she
it
was
was her
born,
twin.
she was actually a twin.
Yes.
And oh God,
And
this
the other didn't develop.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the remain that I found.
Interesting.
Very
And
interesting,
how old
actually.
was that?
30-something.
And a
The female was
or-
30-something.
So you do not know why she died eventually,
No.
since you just had.
I
those
didn't
bone
find any
twins?
signs of the skeletons
Oh, that is
that
but that is
caused
super cool.
her death. Yes, it's very interesting, actually.
Very rare case.
Yes.
So I see you have.
I wrote an article, actually, about that.
Cool. So Carola, I'm sorry, because I'm used to say Carola, and then in English I
Yes.
try to say Carola, and then it was this weird word that came out of my mouth.
It's actually very, it's easier to say it in English because I pronounce it Carola.
Carola.
It's like Carol in English and then A in the end. Carola.
So what is the next career aspiration? Or are you happy teaching right
Except
now?
my house in Italy.
Yeah, well, you're right. Yeah, winning the millions.
That would be my
and then
next,
the house
actually.
in Italy. Okay, but
Yes,
nothing in
yes.
between, right?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe direct to Italy with the next flight. I don't know.
And is there any, lastly, is there any message, any piece of advice that you want to give to future archaeologists, osteologists, nurses, anything, what you think that, what would be of impact for people who are passionate about making a difference in their field?
I always say to my students, my students in osteology and archaeology, and even in my nursing students actually, then that you need to be brave, you need to want to have knowledge, you need to put some effort in your studies and what you do, and you need to, as a woman, you need to stand straight, with your back, and you front life in that way, and with all the courage that you have, and then I think whatever path you choose, you can actually travel far. I think, be determined, kind of. And then if you, and also of course then with my example, if you want to change your life, you don't need to decide today what to do in the rest of your life. You don't need to do that. You can change.
No, yeah.
Maybe your life have many different paths. Maybe you just take one in the beginning and then you change your path a little bit. That's okay to do that.
See, I can hear the words of wisdom and experience, or the tone of wisdom and experience in your words. So I think they probably have a lot of, or a big impact on your students. Because I know that, you can feel that, when you say that you know what you're talking about. It's not just shallow or empty words. So thank you so very much. Very well said. Very wonderful interview. I could have talked to you for hours.
Thank you very much, Katrin. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
And as I said in the beginning, it feels like we're very close. You're in Florida, me in Stockholm, but still very close.
Yeah. It's amazing what, technique can do these days.
Yeah.
It feels like you're sitting right next to me, and I wish you could. Thank you so very much. And to everyone who listened to today, if you like this podcast, please, give us a like, subscribe us, and it was a pleasure having you. Thank you.
Your story matters. Reach out to us at SWFLfrontline@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music under @SWFL Frontline.